That's not one of ours. Why is it inside our docking bay? The Clythar security chief's voice cracked over the station-wide comms, laced with disbelief. Every frequency across the command grid flickered as officers scrambled to verify docking rosters. No answer came. Just a growing wave of silence, heavier than protocol could hold. Inside Docking Bay 6, the stealth vessel Shade didn't move, didn't broadcast, didn't acknowledge. It simply was a shape where none should exist. Commander Varnholt sat in his command chair, helmet retracted, jaw locked. Dim blue lighting carved shadows across his face, etched deep from 2 decades of black ops. Sweat beaded along his temple not from heat, but from calculation. He didn't blink as he whispered. And now the clock starts. The interior of the Shade was cramped, designed for function, not comfort. Walls insulated in ripple-textured black polymer pulsed with quiet thermal shifts. Every screen had been muted, every system on standby except the pulse-fed proximity array, displaying Clythar movement as twitching white motes on a dark grid. A gloved hand reached up and tapped one of the copper toggles above. The display shifted. One of the motes flickered into red. Active scan pattern. Varn didn't curse. He didn't need to. Instead, he leaned forward. Status, he said calmly. A soft reply came from the left, where Lieutenant Herrick Dre crouched near the auxiliary interface. They've sealed the outer corridor, vents locked. Environmental regulation is starting surge cycling. His breath fogged slightly. Clythar ventilation was colder than Earth standards. Varn stood. Every step from the bridge's matte floor was absorbed by noise-dampening mesh. He tapped the fuselage panel beside the primary viewport. Through the narrow slit of adaptive alloy, the docking bay lay spread rows of Clythar cargo haulers, mechanical loading arms stiff with paralysis, and, above, surveillance domes tracking empty air. Deploy camouflage alignment, Varn ordered. Now. A low-toned click confirmed the Shade's outer hull microtiling was adjusting, mimicking the textural variants of the docking walls. Paint corrosion, power scuffs, maintenance welds. From the outside, it would appear like just another forgotten scaffold. The human ship didn't vanish. It belonged. Varn's mind spun through timelines. The Shade's cloak wasn't a simple invisibility grid. It was a quantum displacement envelope. As long as the station's electromagnetic net stayed at baseline, they remained undiscovered. But that net was tightening, and once the Clythar's automated grid swept across Docking Bay 6 at full resolution, everything would change. He turned to Herrick. Pull up the propulsion profile. Herrick swiped across the HUD, an orange schematic unfolded. The Clythar propulsion system was marked by a core chamber, surrounded by phased lattice rings. Each ring pulsed in sequence, folding space in bursts small enough to change direction mid-jump. That meant their cruisers could chase, redirect, or flank before Earth's vessels had finished course corrections. That was why Varn was here. He remembered the Council briefing clearly. A long metal room beneath Luna's surface. No windows, no questions, just objectives. You are not here to provoke, you are not here to retaliate, you are here to rewrite our limits. And now they had docked inside the lion's throat? Varn's wristwatch vibrated. A coded pulse. 27 minutes since touchdown. No Clythar response teams had entered yet. That would change. He opened the mission log and added a single line. Infiltration complete, awaiting sweep. Target data located, awaiting field condition shift. As he sealed the log, a deep grinding noise shook the bay walls. Varn's nostrils flared. The recycled air, already cold, now carried a faint copper tang. Reactive coolant release. Clythar systems were compensating for internal rerouting. That meant full lockdown. They've isolated the chamber, Herrick said, not needing to be told. No entry, no exit. Varn let the silence settle before answering. Good, That keeps them out too. They weren't going to run. That was never the mission. He stepped toward the internal vent near the hatch. A thin trail of condensation now coiled around its mouth. Clythar systems were purging warmth from the walls. Within 2 minutes, thermal scanning would become viable. The shade's envelope could distort visibility, but not nullify it entirely. The console beeped. A new signal. The Clythar had activated patrol protocols. 6 mechanical drones entered the docking bay, spindly legs clicking against steel tiles, each with a swiveling multi-lens head and twin arc rifles slung low like mantis arms. Their motion was methodical, controlled. Varn exhaled through clenched teeth. They're moving slow. They don't know what they're hunting. Yeah. He toggled a switch. A narrow slit above the shade's frame ejected a vapor stream, thermal exhaust, intentionally delayed. The vapor merged with coolant mist in the upper gantries. The effect, misleading heat dispersion. The drones paused. One emitted a chirping frequency burst. The rest responded, forming a triangle around an empty corner behind a supply rack. Herrick leaned close. We bought seconds, not much more. The silence inside the shade was deeper now, not just from the absence of noise, but from intent. Everything that mattered was outside. Varn stared out the viewport again. For a brief second he saw his reflection, streaked with condensation, warped by inner frost. The shade wasn't just a vessel anymore, it was a trespass. A blade buried in bone. The comms unit crackled. An intercepted external feed. Clythar command voice spoke in their rigid cadence, tone rising. Dock entry unlisted. Sensors confirm anomaly. Status green to red. Lockdown terminal requested. They'd spotted something. Maybe the exhaust trail, maybe the power variance. Didn't matter. He tapped the deck once with his boot. Herrick knew the signal. Power down sequence, Varn ordered. Level 0, full shadow mode. The lights dimmed until only the retinal interfaces remained active. Faint glows against the bridge's contour. And outside, the drones turned. Toward them. Varn didn't blink. Let them come, he muttered. The last thing he did before sealing the chamber was press his gloved hand against the shade's internal wall. His father used to say, every shadow means someone standing in the light. That didn't apply here. This time, the shadow was all that remained. Is that confirmed? Captain Torin jazzed, voice cut across the observation deck like wire drawn through bone. The glass in his hand trembled faintly as the decoded burst signal stabilized on the black site terminal. Lines of compressed data flickered against the concrete wall behind him. Coordinates, hull telemetry, heat bleed. Docking base 6, the shade, cloaked, cornered. Commander Varnholt was trapped inside a Clythar war station, and he hadn't screamed for help. He'd whispered coordinates into lunar silence. Torin dropped the glass onto the table without looking. It didn't break. Just rolled. The room around him was half dock, all stone and steel. The lunar blacksite's war room didn't accommodate sentiment. The floor panels bore the scorch of welded corrections, names removed, insignias scraped clean. 3 observers sat in council formation, coats tight at the collar, silence resting on their shoulders like frost. Counselor Rake adjusted the bridge of his glasses, breath steaming from the cold. His message was clear, Rake muttered. Data core identified, propulsion sequence located, cloak's integrity degrading. The youngest of them, a systems analyst named Varric, squinted at the feed. It's just a matter of time before the Clythar break grid silence and hit that bay with a hard scan. When that happens, they'll find the shade embedded in their wall like a parasite, Turan finished, stepping forward. Rake raised a brow. And if they do? What then? We can't deploy fleet assets without alerting the entire sector. Torin ignored the question. Instead, he stepped to the central operations console and keyed in a new request. A detailed map of the Clythar station shimmered to life. Rotational schematics, energy fields, docked cruisers, and refinery placements overlaid in dull red markers. He focused on a single pulsar node near the aft engine tower. "There's another way in," Torrin said flatly. "Maintenance shaft 19A runs beneath their lateral intake exchangers. Low purity traffic, minimal patrols. If we drop a 4-man team via gravity tether during their coolant cycle, we land inside without triggering alerts." Counselor Drin leaned forward. "You're suggesting sabotage." "I'm suggesting leverage," Torrin replied. "Varn's trapped. If we punch their power core, we give him movement. And if we time it right, we can extract without waking their entire damn fleet." Rake folded his hands. "You're asking us to gamble Earth's only cloaked vessel on a hunch that we can hit a Clythar Armada's backbone without consequence." Torrin's jaw flexed. "This isn't about gambling. This is about finishing what we didn't in 2140. The words landed like a blade. Rake glanced at the others. "You think that disaster qualifies you to lead another infiltration?" Torrin didn't flinch. "That disaster was due to a command split. I wanted to act, Varn wanted silence. We lost 3 operatives and a captured Clythar scout ship. You buried the footage, but I remember every frame." Counselor Dren looked to the feed again. The scrolling telemetry hadn't changed, but the tension between the lines had. Subtle variances in thermal distribution. Signs the Clythar were ramping internal scanners. The shade wouldn't remain invisible much longer. Finally, Rake exhaled. "You have 6 hours. Assemble your team. No contact. No open channels. If this fails, then the Council never authorized anything," Torrin finished. "Understood." He turned before the reply arrived. 3 floors down, in Deployment Annex 9, the tungsten bay doors split open like jaws. Torrin strode through the vapor curtain into the prep zone. 4 men waited inside. Each of them lean, outfitted, scar-shelled from operations that never made Earth news. Operative Merrick was first to step forward, pulling a heat-masking harness over his shoulders. "You picked us," Merrick said. "You picking the target too?" Torrin tapped the station schematic onto a cold sideweight tablet and dropped it onto the table. "Power cores nested beneath Reactor Well 12. Clythar protocols force a delayed resync after internal surges. Gives us a window of 120 seconds max after detonation. We hit fast. You cover the shafts. I plant the charge." "And Varn?" asked Talgear, the comms specialist. He was younger, but no less hardened. "We pulling him out?" Torrin met his gaze. "If he survives the breach, he moves to Dockport 9. We'll punch a corridor with the blast, enough for Shade to reposition. Extraction isn't our mission, but we don't leave the man blind." There was no cheering, no nods, just the silent acceptance of men already stepping into their own memorials. Outside the gravity tether chamber, a faint vibration rippled through the floor plates. Kinetic engines prepared the drop alignment, timed to coincide with Clythar coolant distribution, the one period their maintenance grid tolerated subthermal disturbance. Torrin stood alone at the deployment window, visor lowered, grip steady on the tether brace. He remembered 2140, the sound of airlocks locking behind them, the delay in Varn's call. The moment Torrin realized that command silence meant death, not control. "You always think 3 moves ahead," he muttered to himself, "but you never account for people bleeding in the first one." The deployment officer gave a signal. 4 green strobes lit in sequence. They were cleared. Torrin nodded once, then stepped backward into the drop cradle. Execute. The tether's grip seized his spine like a punch. Then the floor vanished. Gravity inverted, blood surged, the stars tilted. Below, the Clythar station gleamed under artificial suns, bristling with turrets layered in rotating antenna clusters and looming over the gaseous swirl of the Centauri system's largest giant. There was no margin for missteps, no path back. As Torrin fell toward the beast that had swallowed Varn whole, he didn't pray. He just clenched his jaw and whispered, This time, you move when I say move. Back inside the shade, the heat dispersion coils began to flicker. Clythar Gridsync was crawling closer. Herrick looked up from the console, pale. Varn. The envelope's degrading if we stay embedded much longer. A pulse cracked over the comms. Earth. Varn read the hash once, then again. Torin. Herrick frowned. He's on the station? Looks like it. Should we block the signal? Could be a trap. No, Varn said coldly. It's real. He wouldn't use this vector unless he was in. Herrick's fingers trembled on the console edge. So what now? Varn didn't blink. We let him blow the core. Trask dropped flat against the polymer pipe as a scanner beam passed inches above his back, its glare flashing green across the grime-slick walls. 1 floor below, the Clythar patrol continued without pause. Metallic joints clicking in perfect rhythm, claws flexing around stocked rifles. Their sensor arrays tilted once toward the shaft ceiling before shifting back down. He didn't breathe until the sound faded. From behind, Merrick's voice rasped low. That was sweep 3, intervals tightening. Trask lifted his head slightly. The tunnel air was thick. Recycled fluids, scorched insulation, coolant mist. Everything reeked of use and abandonment. The shaft wasn't part of the main grid. It was a forgotten artery, half sealed during earlier retrofits. They'd entered it through a maintenance lock 3 decks up, and now the corridor's claustrophobic choke held them like prey inside a throat. He wiped his visor with a sleeve and looked forward. The core junction chamber loomed 50 meters ahead, guarded by vertical conduit columns and nested meshwork. Reactor pulses flickered irregularly through their casing, pale blue light blinking like a slow heartbeat. Beneath them, coolant runoff hissed into shallow troughs, steaming against old alloy. Karen's voice came through the comm line. We're at No Delta, ready for stage 1. Trask tapped the neck plate twice. Confirmed, moving to slot the first charge. He crawled forward, boots scraping against dried flakes of oxidized coolant. A tight bend funneled into a downward slope no wider than his shoulders. The EMP charge pack strapped to his back made navigation difficult, but stopping wasn't an option. Each segment had to be placed exactly within the system's harmonic channel or the blast wouldn't cycle cleanly, and the shade's shielded systems depended on synchronized delivery. He reached a junction box, old, scarred wires frayed and bent into strange configurations. Someone had spliced it decades ago, Clythar script etched into the casing with heat stylus marks. He reached over his shoulder, pulled the first charge, and wedged it into a niche beneath the panel. The adhesive activated with a hiss, clamping the device into position. A green diode blinked once, then pulsed rhythmically. Stage 1 armed, Trask whispered, proceeding to the secondary channel. As he shifted, a new sound drifted through the vent wall. Hydraulic whine, subtle but growing louder. He froze. Traced the vibration. A Clythar crawler drone 1 deck above, probably initiating a thermal pulse sweep. If that system cycled early, it would detect anything with residual heat, even embedded camo fields. Across the comm, Merrick hissed, "We've got movement east corridor, multiple signatures." Talgor chimed in, "Converging around coolant ports. They're narrowing." Corin cut in, calm but iron-voiced, "Stick to timing. Get the charge in, Trask." He dropped low, crawling under a support pipe slick with condensation. The walls closed in tighter. No standing room, no maneuver space. He moved forward on elbows and toes until he found the second junction. A radiation warning glyph flashed beside it. Coolant pipe, breach. Sweat broke under Trask's suit. He checked the rad reading, elevated but survivable. He ripped open the panel and reached for the second charge. His hand froze. The timer display was dead. No LED, no power feedback. The unit had shorted during insertion. He yanked it back, flipped open the casing. The power node had cracked under torsion. The microcapacitor wasn't cycling. Merrick's voice barked. "Third sweep incoming," Talgor added. 30 seconds until thermal flood. Trask looked at the unit, then the panel, then his own chest rig. He reached down, ripped his own battery pack from his targeting scope, and began rewiring. His fingers moved fast, raw training, nothing elegant. Wires twisted, spark jumped. His thumb clamped the node tight as the capacitor surged. The charge blinked red, then cycled green. He jammed it into place, braced with his back against the wall, and activated the override seal with his wrist blade. Unit locked. Trask exhaled. But the tunnel didn't feel lighter. The thermal system whined. Across the shaft, coolant purged from the valves, cascading like a waterfall of frost. Heat displacement spread like fog. Clythar sensors would pick that up. Up above, inside Docking Bay 6, Commander Varnholt saw the first signs of change. The internal thermal curtain began to retract, exposing heat variances in the shade's cloaking envelope. Eric's voice cracked. Cloak's losing coherence. They'll detect bleed. Varn didn't reply. He just moved. He toggled the pressure valves on the shade's outer hull and opened the inner airlock vents. The vessel's interior temperature plummeted. Vapor rolled through the crew chamber. Frost webbed across displays. Eric coughed, clutching his mask as oxygen levels dropped. "You're venting." "I know," Varn said, voice sharp. "It's either that or they see us." Back in the tunnels, Trask shivered, his body reacting to the coolant backlash and lingering radiation. He felt his knuckles stiffen as he crawled toward the third node. His lungs tightened. Time ran thin. The last charge had to be set directly against the core manifold. A tight space, circular crawl space beneath the stabilization ring. The climb down was brutal. One slip, and you dropped into the coolant sump where the temperature would crush your heart before you screamed. He slid into place, pulled the third charge. Burned. But the radiation was stronger here. His mask gave a warning tone. "Final node, armed," he said, breathing hard. Torrin's voice came low. "That zone's hot, Trask, pull out." "Not yet. Sync's unstable. Need to shield it." "What are you saying?" "I'm saying if I leave now the pulse breaks early. That means misfire." Silence. Then Torrin said, "You sure?" Trask let out a breath. "I didn't climb into a Clythar nest to screw the finish. Detonate when ready." Talger cut in. "Radiation's spiking. You won't make it out." "Then make the countdown matter." If the channel closed. Trask laid back against the curve of the manifold, arms wrapping the charge casing, body curled to block pulse deflection. He closed his eyes, felt the rumble of coolant lines behind him, heard his own heartbeat tapping inside his ears. Then, nothing. The pulse hit. Lights across the Clythar station died in a sweeping cascade. Whole decks plunged into darkness. Internal systems tripped, then locked into restart protocols. The gravity field twisted, magnetic rails disengaged. Inside Docking Bay 6, Varn felt the shade shift. Now, the magnetic anchors retracted. The vessel slid free like a falling knife, cutting low along the inner wall. Outside the bay, a port corridor blinked offline, isolated, dark. Eric's hands shook on the control column. "We're repositioning?" Varn was already moving. "To Dockport 9. We've got 120 seconds. Let's see if they're worth it." The lights went out like a switchblade folding shut. Varnholt stepped into the hallway first, rifle low, helmet sealed, boots quiet. Behind him, tech officers Bram Vesk and Yolan Dar followed, hunched under their packs, eyes darting. Each footstep landed on chilled composite tiles, slick with moisture condensing from the sudden blackout surge. It would last less than 2 minutes. 90 seconds if backup generators cut in early, and they had already burned 10 just crossing the shaft bridge. "Target node is on sublevel 3, just beyond coolant barrier 4, Bram whispered, breath misting inside his faceplate. "We stay low," Varn replied. "No lights, no interference, extract only what matters." The terminal they were after, node Epsilon, was a dedicated Clithar core cluster buried inside a sealed maintenance channel. According to captured schematics, it wasn't wired into the main station net, likely isolated to prevent contamination from human data crawlers, which made it perfect. And unreachable, unless someone opened it from the inside during a blackout window. Barnes' glove found the wall panel. The surface was coated with ash from old coolant burns. He keyed in a manual override code, patched through Earth's decryptors, and waited. The door slid sideways with a creak like frozen bone. The chamber beyond was tight, lit only by the dull red flicker of emergency sensors trying to re-establish network authority. Inside stood a single Clithar access terminal, cylindrical, rimmed with data prongs, pulsing gently. No seats. Clithar preferred to interface standing upright, reading streams through neurotactile gloves and command blinks. Yolan stepped in first, pulling a tri-tap uplink cable from his belt. If this port architecture holds, we should be able to bypass the translator and grab raw stack info. Barn nodded. 30 seconds for top layer scan, you don't get more. Bram crouched beside the casing, peeling away a vent panel. Behind it, a row of glowing threads pulsed with data movement. No shielding. They weren't expecting a breach this deep, Bram muttered, sounding almost disappointed. Yolan snorted. Overconfidence. Clithar arrogance runs deeper than their security layers. Data streamed in slow pulses through the uplink. Varn watched the indicators light up across their display slate. Red, yellow, then solid green. Their translator scripts kicked in, cycling syntactic stacks until raw schematics emerged. Engine housing, reactor flow, burst-fold guidance systems, and then isotope references. S79, Bram muttered. Here it is, every path leads to it. Varn leaned in, eyes narrowing at the rotating molecule model rendered on the corner screen. This is the core of their entire maneuver envelope. It doesn't just power the drive, it steers it. They're threading space with it, Yolan added. Each burst is calibrated using micro-reactive ratios of L79. You can't replicate that with ion curves or plasma skips. We need that material to match their vectors. Barnes' mouth tightened. Where's it refined? Bram tapped the rotating sequence. A string of Clithar glyphs translated into a station sector map. It's here. Subdeck refinery, thermal isolation zone. Probably automated. If we hit it, we break their legs, Varn finished. The air suddenly shifted. A low vibration ran underfoot. Lights above the console blinked. Twice. The backup generators had re-engaged. Yolan froze mid-keystroke. We're early. Power's coming back on. Download everything you've got. Now, Varn barked. Bram disconnected the backup cache drive and shoved it into Varn's armored belt pouch. That's the main sequence, not full, but enough to rebuild their cycle algorithm. Yolan kept typing. One more file, thermal offsets. Without that, we can't reverse engineer jump tolerances. A static buzz hit their earcoms. Warning, corridor lockdown, central security net restored, came a distorted voice. Herrick, back on the shade. You've got Clithar patrols spinning up. They're sweeping thermal bursts. Varn turned to Yolan. We're leaving. 30 seconds. You're done. I can finish. I said done. Varn moved to grab his shoulder. Yolan yanked away, fingers still dancing across the input. I'm not leaving without this. It's the steering, offset. Leave it. The hallway outside lit up. White beams flickering to life, shadows disappearing. Doors hissed open 3 chambers down. Footsteps, not human. Bram backed toward the vent panel. We don't go now, we don't go. Yolan's voice rose. 10 more seconds, I swear. A red light blinked over the terminal. Barnes' eyes locked on the symbol. Cooling submarine teen activated. Terminal was cycling back into protected mode. Yolan. Before the last word finished, Varn reached across and yanked the uplink cable clean out of the port. Yolan screamed. The download interrupted. Fingers clawed for the drive unit. Too late. A surge arced from the console. Defensive field reacting to unauthorized removal. Yolan slammed back into the wall, convulsing, smoke curling from his suit's chest plate. He collapsed sideways. Varn dragged him by the collar halfway into the exit channel. Yolan's visor was cracked, blood inside. One eye fluttered open. "You didn't let me finish," he gasped. "We got what matters," Varn said coldly. Yolan tried to speak again, but the lights above him surged, then went dark as another field power cycle snapped off. "Stay with him or go?" Bram asked, voice hoarse. "Go," Varn said. "We aren't trading propulsion data for a corpse." He dropped the rest of Yolan's gear beside him, pulled the drive pouch from his belt and turned. The door closed without ceremony. Back inside the shed, Herrick looked up as Varn climbed back into the pilot bay. "You got it?" "What about Yolan?" He didn't. Herrick didn't respond, just turned back to the controls, pale. Varn keyed the channel open. "Torin. New objective. That refinery's our priority now." His voice, for once, carried no weight of debate. Just execution. Torin wiped the condensation from his visor with the back of his wrist and ducked beneath the corroded archway leading into the refinery's lower bypass. Pipes jutted from the walls like frozen tendons. Somewhere above, coolant rumbled through broken valves, echoing in stuttering bursts through the vented metal. Every surface down here sweated heat, grime, or pressure. Behind him, operatives Merrick and Talger advanced in staggered rhythm, rifles low, boots finding grip along the graded path. The air was thick with volatile vapor. Chemical, not synthetic. Harsh enough to sting the eyes. Torin stopped at a junction node and raised his wrist pad. The map of the refinery loaded fragment by fragment, stitched together from incomplete data pulled from Yolan's partial download. The pulse core was located beneath the stabilization ring, behind 2 layers of shielding keyed to Clythar biosigns. It wasn't just locked, it was segregated. "We're close," he said. "Membrane passage is 2 turns east. Keep your safeties off." Talgear moved past him and knelt beside the access panel. He pulled a data card from his shoulder rig and slid it into the reader. Green light. Recognition pulse from the biosample loader they'd brought from Earth. It contained cellular fragments extracted from a dead Clethar pilot captured during a skirmish 5 years ago. The membrane at the end of the corridor shimmered, then folded inward like a mouth exhaling frost. "Go," Torin ordered. They stepped into a narrow corridor where the heat rose sharply. Here, coolant pipes glowed faintly beneath the paneling and fine beads of moisture rolled down the walls. The floor vibrated with slow, rhythmic pulses. Reactor activity. Beyond a bolted frame stood the reactor control ring, a circular trench with layered banks of cooling fins and exposed stabilizers humming with static buildup. In the center, behind translucent shielding, the reactor chamber pulsed with a dim orange hue. Energy swirled within, venting faint arcs of distortion against the core plating. Merrick broke left toward the ring perimeter. "Charge points marked," he called out. "But shielding's feeding a residual pulse field. Charge sync is off by 2 seconds. Talgear cursed under his breath. "That's why the last mission failed. The pulse shield throws false stability spikes." Torin unclipped the first charge from his backplate and examined its calibration readout. The sync error was real, shield interference offsetting the detonator cycle. He knelt, stripped open the back casing and began rewiring. Pull the timing resistor, run it without adaptive sync, manual countdown only. "You sure about that?" Talgear asked. "No tech down here is going to survive anyway." They calibrated the charge using stripped drone parts from the earlier encounter. Power regulators twisted into crude delay amplifiers. It wasn't elegant. But it did work once. Merrick slammed the first charge onto the ring plate with a heavy clang, triggering the magnetic lock. The unit beeped once, then went inert, primed. Halgear crouched beside the conduit bank, sweat pouring down his neck. 2 charges left. If that timing goes wrong, then we vaporize inside Clithar plumbing, Turan replied. Finish the setup. The next few minutes passed in silence, broken only by hissing valves and short-circuit pings from overloaded vents. Then the alert hit. Motion scanner flashed. "Turan!" Merrick shouted. 3 heat contacts. South shaft. They were coming fast. Clithar infantry most likely. Not drones. Movement was too controlled. "Positions," Turan barked. Talger flipped a crate for cover and propped his rifle over it. Merrick ducked behind the ridge of the coolant assembly, already aiming downrange. Turan stayed where he was, final charge still half-calibrated. The patrol appeared without ceremony. 3 Clithar soldiers in dark exosuits moved into the trench, their torsos extended upward from reinforced armor plates, rifles lifted into active scan. The middle one hissed something in its native tongue. Then opened fire. Sparks jumped off the wall near Turan's left boot. A burst scorched the coolant pipe above his shoulder, sending a flash of hot vapor across the trench. Talgear returned fire, peppering the lead Clithar across the chest plate. Merrick followed up with a short-range grenade that ripped the trailing soldier's leg unit in half. The third creature spun, discharging a bolt that clipped Merrick in the thigh. He dropped, cursed, and pulled himself backward, dragging his rifle. Turan didn't look up. He locked the final wire in place, yanked the power cell, and slapped the unit onto the ring support with a solid clang. Talger fired a final round that tore the remaining Clithar through the base of the jaw. The trench fell silent, except for Merrick's grunts. "Status?" Turan asked. "Alive," Merrick replied through clenched teeth. "But not fun." Turan moved fast. He checked each charge manually, ignoring standard sync reads. Their timers were offset by 1 second each to stagger the pulse and slip past the shielding sequence. A standard detonation would bounce off the field. This way, each charge forced the next one deeper into core vulnerability. He set the timers. 15 seconds, no more. "Extraction point?" Talger asked. "Back the way we came," Turan answered. "Secondary junction, cut through coolant bleed, no delay." Alger limped over to help Merrick. They moved together, rifles slung. Turan stood at the edge of the ring, staring at the faintly glowing chamber beyond the shield. He activated the countdown. As the timer clicked down, they moved through the flooded corridor, every step heavier under the growing thrum of reactor instability. Pressure valves blew off overhead, spraying hot mist. Alarms began to stutter into life, half-human by partial station systems. Iran's report, Turan didn't look back until they reached the extraction hatch. At the 13th second, the first charge blew. The pulse reverberated through the walls like an iron club smashing stone. Second charge detonated, then the third. The corridor behind them vanished into rolling fire. A rupture cracked the floor plate. One of the reactor arms tore through the ceiling, trailing slag. From the upper viewports of the Clithar cruiser bay, 3 warships began to drift. Lights flickered, navigation fins stuttered, their drives, fed by refinery lines, coughed once, then failed. Inside the shade, Herrick stared at the readings, eyes wide. 3 cruisers just went dark, he whispered. Varn didn't respond. He was already watching the data cycle reroute. The Clithar weren't maneuvering anymore. They were floating, and the clock was turning against them. The refinery rupture detonated through the station's lower hemisphere, tearing reinforced decks apart in a jagged spiral of pressure and flame. Docked cruisers listed without guidance, their magnetic clamps sheared from the force. Smoke surged into open corridors, and gravity panels cracked under uneven loads. Varnholt watched the reactor implosion ripple through the shade's sensors in real time. 3 Clithar warships no longer responded to beacon pings, dead in orbit. Refineries gone, Herrick confirmed. Their supply chains crippled. Varn didn't smile. His focus shifted to the vector grid flashing over the helm display. The Clythar flagship hadn't stalled. It had awakened. Energy spiked from the station's northern ring. The flagship deployed its drone fleet in 4 dispersal patterns. Interceptor nets launched in spinning formations, each with layered kinetic pods and satellite tracking. They weren't trying to reclaim the station anymore. They were building a trap. The Shade's path to escape, already narrow, collapsed with each formation spreading out like closing hands. Herrick's hands danced over controls. We're surrounded. Varn narrowed his eyes. Set railgun batteries to short burst, low spread. Target drone relays, not the swarms. Outside the forward viewport, the debris field around the station turned into a spinning cage. Massive cargo struts drifted in fractured arcs. Broken hull plates flashed by the Shade's wings. Through it all, dozens of drones darted like insects, weaving between station fragments and dumping tracking flares. A proximity klaxon screeched. "Due contacts approaching from dorsal arc," Herrick called. Varn banked hard left. The Shade scraped past a ruptured maintenance bay. Fragments slashed along the hull, sparks trailing. A kinetic warhead missed by a half-second, slamming into the drifted husk of a Clythar shuttle, which exploded outward in silence. Inside the chaos, a secondary signal cut through. "This is Terran," came a sharp, static-laced voice. "Shuttle active, approaching your vector." The Shade's scanners locked onto a limping auxiliary transport, wobbling through rotating wreckage, one engine visibly trailing burnt coolant. It was one of the Clythar's own maintenance skiffs, repurposed by Torrent after the refinery breach. He was coming in too hot, banking wide, trying to punch through the collapsing formation from the far side. "I see you," Varn said into the channel. "Bring her down slow. We'll match." "I don't have slow," Torrent snapped. "This hull's bleeding, lost one thruster. If I stall, I'd drift into the blockade net." Herrick's eyes widened. "The drones are adjusting for interception. They'll catch him." Varn leaned over the nav. "Plot an intercept curve, close the distance while we still can." The Shade fired 2 rearward countermeasures and cut forward velocity. It ducked under a snapped comms tower, skidded left through a channel of shredded plating, then pushed toward Torren's broken shuttle. Then the pull hit. The entire Shade lurched backward, its frame screeching against the inertia dampeners. Varn's teeth clenched. "We're caught." "Tractor beam," Herrick growled. "Flagship's got us." On the outer scope, the Clythar flagship loomed. Angular. Built for siege, not speed. Its gravity harness had caught the Shade mid-burn, locking onto the central mass. Escape vector blinked red. Torren's voice returned, strained, close. "I've got 1 EMP left. Localized discharge. It'll cut that beam. But it's inside this damn skiff." "Negative," Varn shot back. "If it overloads." "No time to argue," Torren barked. "Watch your screens." A white pulse surged from the damaged shuttle. The explosion wasn't wide, but it shattered the visual feed for 2 seconds and collapsed the tractor lock in a cascade of static. The Shade dropped free, momentum kicking in. "Free fall," Herrick confirmed, gripping the console. "We're drifting clean." But the shuttle spun. Duran's signal spiked, then dropped. Varn swore. "Trace that beacon." "Got it. No comms. Emergency signal only." "Lock docking clamps. We're going in." "What?" "That shuttle's losing structural." "He saved us. We bring him home." The Shade twisted sideways, flanking the shuttle's descent. Fires poured from its ventral stabilizers. Hull gashes tore along the port side. Varn aligned the docking aperture and initiated manual override. "Clamps ready," Herrick said, sweat along his jawline. The hatch sealed. Varn crossed the loading corridor with his helmet down and visor cold. The smell inside the shuttle hit first. Burnt wiring, scorched padding, coolant in the air. Two operatives sat slumped by the inner bay wall, both wounded, suits torn. And on the floor, blood pooled around a shattered metal casing. Torrin's chest plate cracked clean across the center. Shrapnel stuck out below the rib line. He was coughing, face pale. "You waited," Torrin rasped. "You bought the time," Varn said. Knelt, pulled Turan by the straps and slung him over his shoulder. As he turned back toward the Shade's main corridor, the floor shook again. Far beyond, the flagship turned to align its remaining batteries. They weren't pursuing the Shade anymore. They were charging for destruction. "Race for jump," Varn called over internal comms. "We don't wait for another net." Herrick's voice came through tight. "Coordinates locked. Folding corridor mapped. Initiate on your go." Varn stepped onto the deck, blood trailing behind him, and dropped Turan beside the med station. "Jump us." The Shade vanished from Clethar space in a fracture of blue distortion. The blockade remained quiet, broken, and blind. Torn blinked, but nothing sharpened. Light spilled across his vision in jagged patterns. He tried lifting his head, but the pressure in his chest pinned him flat. The cold bite of oxygen hissed against his neck, and muted vibrations ran beneath his back. Voices rose and fell around him, blurred, indistinct, drowned under static. The ceiling wasn't part of the station anymore. It curved with low beams lined in copper mesh, vibrating at odd intervals. A sharp pulse jolted through his ribs, and memory staggered forward. The EMP, the shuttle. His breath caught. He tried speaking. Nothing moved. "Torrin, you're on board," came a voice, close, urgent. "Slowly, Varn." Everything slowed. The world snapped back into place, one sense at a time. Pain across the left side, damp fabric clinging to his collarbone, the stink of coolant and blood soaking his suit liner, the dull edge of pressure pads digging into his back. His eyes focused just enough to catch a glimpse of the main screen. Vector curves spiraling, their edges pulsing red. "What's wrong with the field?" he rasped. Eric turned from the panel. "Quantum cloaks destabilizing, reactor casings compromised from the pull. Hull temperatures are erratic." "Translation?" Torrin asked, trying to sit up. "We can't stabilize the corridor." Varn stood at the helm, unmoving. His gloved fingers rested near the throttle, not touching. The entire sheet rattled around them, occasional bursts of noise punctuated by hard spatial feedback, a reminder that their drive envelope was folding without harmony. "We're flying blind," Herrick added, voice lower. "Jump coordinates are corrupted by the station's collapse field. Simulators can't plot a stable line." Varn's jaw tightened. "Then we do it without them." "You're going manual?" Herrick shot back. "That's a jump corridor with distortion bleed and no reference?" "I know what it is." Herrick backed off. "You're the only one who's ever done it." Varn didn't answer. He locked the primary thrust vector and shut down the secondary displays. The navigation field flickered, leaving only a central burst gouge glowing in blue. The flight path was incomplete. A fracture waited at the midpoint, an unstable seam where jump waves had started overlapping. Torrin forced a breath through gritted teeth. "You can't math that out." Not. "Then what the hell are you using?" Varn leaned forward, eyes locked on the unstable curvature ahead. "Instinct." Torrin's eyes narrowed. "You better not get us killed for poetry." "No one's writing poetry," Varn muttered. You die ugly." The Shade's bulk twisted with the gravitational shear as Varn punched the stabilizers. Friction cascaded across the bow. Hull reinforcements vibrated like dry branches. The jump corridor wavered ahead. Fragments of fractured light spinning in slow arcs, folding against each other. Then the forward sensors lit with an external broadcast signal, unfiltered broad spectrum. A Clethar voice, guttural and clipped, broke through the static. "You've started something Earth cannot finish. We are not the end of your reach. We are the beginning of your retreat." Herrick flinched. "Flagships transmitting station-wide. broadcast aimed at open relays. They want to burn fear into what's left, Varn said. Let 'em try. Torn coughed, chest rising in spasms. Just jump us, damn it. Ahead, the station ruptured for the second time. The core deck collapsed in a spiral of failing structure. One of the collapsed Clythar cruisers broke off its mount, collided with the ring's scaffold, and spun into a cargo tower. Everything ruptured downward. The gravity field imploded. Fire spread across the visible tiers. Explosive gas feeds lit in sequence like falling dominoes. Varn's eyes never moved. He aligned the unstable jump arc and whispered into the channel. Seal the corridor. And Herrick hesitated. You won't have a second. Seal it. The shade's forward thrust surged. The drive pushed past calibration limits. Varn, guided by raw timing, adjusting microseconds between pulses, carving a split-second correction across the fold seam. The entire structure shuddered around them. A series of sharp cracks rang out along the corridor bulkheads. The lights dimmed. The sensors glitched. And then, the shade vanished. Everything around Torin vanished into pressure and cold. His body screamed. His chest felt like it was being pulled through ice. His thoughts blurred, torn between past and present. The shade's interior vanished. In its place, fragments of 2140 clawed back, a memory of blood. A corridor lined with flame. Varn walking away. You didn't act, he whispered into the dark. But this time, the voice answered. Her voice had softened. The pain spiked again, this time in his abdomen. His mind clawed back toward consciousness, toward something grounded. He tried to open his eyes, but they wouldn't obey. The pressure lifted. His body jerked. Then nothing. A sterile ceiling came into focus. Flat, smooth, with recessed lighting panels humming softly. Torin blinked once. The hum wasn't real. It was his heartbeat. Cool air brushed over his face. Clean linens rustled beneath his arms. A biosensor chirped on his wrist. He turned his head. The Earth Lunar Medical Ward sat still, quiet. No alarms, no red lights, no fire. Outside the window, the curvature of the moon glowed faintly under the Earth's reflection. Shadow moved beside him. Varn stood near the doorway, arms crossed. You made it, Varn said quietly. Torin coughed. You jumped blind. I did. Terrance's lip twitched. You always did like high stakes. Varn stepped closer. Your shuttle stunt saved the shade. Your retrieval saved me, Torin replied. They didn't shake hands. They didn't need to. Outside, the silent Earth rotated, unaware of how close it had come to losing its edge. The shade had returned, and something in the galaxy had shifted with it. 18 months after the shade's return, the first of Earth's new fleet drifted into lunar orbit. The hull was a matte, radar-dissipating composite. Its form was low-profile, thick-bodied, and engineered not for show, but for the unseeable. The Vigilant, flagship of the Horizon series, was burst-fold capable. The drive core hummed behind layered armor, and inside its navigation chamber, L-79 isotope burned clean in a vacuum-fed sphere. No announcement was made, no press release, just a formation of vessels emerging into view, quiet and waiting. Varn Holt watched from the observation deck, arms resting on the rail, shoulders heavier than they had been when he returned. Below him, a technician murmured to another, both too young to know what it had cost to make those drives move without leaving vapor trails. They didn't ask questions when they saw him, just stepped aside. Behind Varn, the doors opened, without hiss or fanfare. Torin entered slowly, his limp subtle but permanent. A scar traced down his left jaw, ending just above the collarbone. He stopped next to Varn without a word. They stood together for a long time, watching the Vigilant stabilize over the cratered plain. Never thought I'd see Earth do it, Torin said finally, matching the Clythar drive tech. In under 2 years. They didn't match it, Varn replied. They leapfrogged it. Torin let out a breath. And no one even knows. They will, Barnes said, tapping the tablet on his wrist. The feed opened, partially redacted footage scrubbed of tactical overlays trimmed to mute the worst of the chaos. But the Shade's silhouette was there, clearly visible in the docking bay, flanked by fire and interceptor flares. The video ended as the vessel vanished, absorbed into a collapsing corridor of unstable light. The jump. It had leaked 3 months ago. No one claimed responsibility. No one denied it either. The footage had been dissected by analysts, civilians, independent researchers. Every frame studied, every flicker slowed. But no one could explain how it was done, and that was the point. They saw the tractor beam, Turan said. They saw the drones, the Clythar flagship. They saw all of it. And then we disappeared, Varn said. They keep calling it a miracle. Garn turned slightly. It wasn't. I know. Outside, a second ship joined the Vigilant. Smaller, tighter build. Same emission signature. Same folded structure. They're calling the project Silent Horizon now, Turin added. Let them. Back in the operations chamber, the Orbital Council had reviewed the entire Shade mission under closed session. No ceremony followed. No ribbons. No monument. Just a line in an encrypted log. Objective met. Risk within threshold. Only the field team received recognition, and even then, behind locked doors, with hands shaken in silence. Varn still wore the original mission band under his wrist guard. The alloy was warped, blackened near the clasp, but he'd never taken it off. Eric transferred to Horizon Command, Varn said. And it, Torin replied. Knew the ship like it was part of his skin. They didn't speak for a moment. Terran broke the silence first. You remember what that Clythar captain said before the jump? Every word. Torin's eyes didn't move from the glass. He thought we wouldn't survive what we started. Thought we wanted conquest, Varn corrected. He didn't understand we were building something worse. Capability, Torin finished. The word hung. Across the communications channels, the Clythar had gone silent after the refinery breach. Their cruisers retreated from disputed borders. Their patrols vanished from neutral lanes. No declarations, no retaliation. Not because they couldn't, because they didn't want to risk what else Earth hadn't shown yet. In response, Earth did threaten, didn't demand tribute. They simply expanded the Horizon series and cut the deployment cycle in half. Traders moved freely again. Outposts once considered undefended received Shade-class reinforcement towers. One network analyst had said in a private forum, later deleted, Earth did more with one ship in 5 hours than the last coalition managed in a decade. Back on the deck, Varn looked to the far left. 3 school groups waited behind a reinforced divider, watching the ship stabilize into formation. One of the instructors whispered to a student, pointing to the recording of the Shade flickering through the enemy's station. The child whispered, But where's the warship? Varn heard it. Torn did too. Neither answered. The doors opened behind them. Counselor Dren stepped into view. He wore civilian dress now, his pin stripped of insignia. But his tone still carried weight. We've approved the next series, he said without preamble. 9 ships, all silent frame. 2 already under fabrication in Martian orbit. Varn nodded once. Good. We'll assign crews by next cycle. You'll choose command. That's council instruction. Understood. Dren lingered, then added, They're not afraid of what you destroyed, Commander. Varn turned slightly. They're afraid of what they missed, Dren finished. He left. Torn chuckled dryly. That's the first time I've heard him sound impressed. He's right, Varn said. He looked out again. Clythar power had been built on fear, on towering cruisers, on overwhelming force. Earth hadn't matched them with scale. They answered with silence, speed, and disappearance. The galaxy didn't fear Earth because of brutality. It feared Earth because nothing about them looked threatening, until it was too late to stop what had already begun. Goran glanced sideways. If they ever come again, Varn replied without pause, they'll find the shadows know how to strike first. The screen dimmed. The fleet held formation. And across every private feed, broadcast edit and recovered drone clip, one message repeated, not in words, but in timing, in shape, in consequence. They looked for warships. We sent a shadow. That's why they lost.